Hey guys, Coach Logan here again, continuing my series on blunders by world champions. So in the last video we talked about Kasparov and, we talked about Kramnik and Kasparov. In this video we're moving again backwards in time to the world champion before Kasparov, which was Anatoly Karpov. And in this position, it's from one of the world championship matches with Kasparov and Karpov. There were many of those. And they were all very close, so every mistake really mattered. And in this position, Garry Kasparov is playing white, Karpov is playing black, and it's about an even position objectively, although Kasparov in typical fashion is putting some pressure with active pieces. And he plays the move in this position, queen to g4, threatening black's rook on d7. And here, Karpov plays what looks like a very natural move, but unfortunately it walks into a pretty nice combination. He plays the move rook to d8 to stack the rooks and defend his rook on d7, but it blunders into a loss. So see now if you can calculate what white played here. It's a very nice combination, actually. Okay, keep your videos paused if you want more time, but I'm going to continue. But what Garry realized here is that black's back rank actually has some issues after this amazing combination, and also black also has some loose piece issues. So we see the move, beautiful move here, queen takes d7, after which rook takes d7, rook to e8 check. The king is forced to have to go to h7, and now we have this discovered check lined up with the rook and the bishop on the loose rook on d7. So after bishop e4 check, black actually resigned here, but I feel like this I should play this out just to show you. So this is check. Black's only reasonable way to get out of this is to play g6, but now white would manage to take the rook on d7, which hits the bishop on b7, which is much more annoying than maybe it seems at first, because if this bishop moves, well, now white just picks up the knight on c6 and has now taken two rooks and a knight for a queen, which is a material advantage. White would now be basically up a piece, and black can't recapture because rook takes f7 is checkmate. So beautiful, beautiful combination by Kasparov. It's maybe a little bit unfair to call this technically, a blunder in the way people typically think about it. Like if we compare last video where Kramnik just missed mate and won, or Kasparov just missed a loose piece, a basic loose piece issue. This one required a nice combination from Garry to win this, but still, I feel a player of Karpov's caliber, especially if they knew there was a tactic here, could have easily found that white has this back rank idea and the loose piece idea. Other moves would have held here. I think if he plays, so if I turn on the engine here, just to kind of show why I included this one. If I put in the engine here, it's saying that this position is just basically even, and if black just plays, maybe this looks a little bit awkward, but even if they just bring the rook back to d8, it's still basically an even game. They're also giving rook to d6 as a possibility. Anything that just doesn't allow that back rank combination with the loose rook on d7. Once Karpov played what he did in the game, rook c to d8, now look at how the evaluation goes all the way to +8. So it's... that's a good example of, it's a blunder in the sense that it was clearly a move that took an even position and just made it dead lost. So that was Anatoly Karpov's biggest blunder. Now let's look at one more from a world champion, and the world champion before Karpov, of course, was the American Robert James Fischer, Bobby Fischer. And here, in this one, I mean, I've been trying to maybe pick some of the examples that maybe aren't like the most well-known, although I guess they're pretty well-known to people who followed these players' careers. But this one is extremely well-known. This is one of the more inexplicable moves in chess history. Especially compared to the problem we just looked at. This is not even really a deep tactical issue. There's clearly was something... I don't know what was going on with Fischer in this first game here, but let's take a look at this. So this comes from the famous Fischer-Spassky match, and from 1972. And everybody remembers that Fischer won that match. It was a big deal when an American player defeated a Russian, and it was an international. There was a lot of hype surrounding that match, and Fischer ended up winning, and he ended up winning pretty convincingly. However, the match did not start well for him. He actually lost the first game and then forfeited the second by not playing in it. So he started out down two games. And the first game is the one we're looking at here, where Fischer's playing black, Spassky's playing white. This is just a completely dry, even, symmetrical pawn bishop endgame with the draw being the overwhelmingly likely result, which is a fine way to start the match, especially playing black the first round. But for some reason in this position, Fischer played a move that, to this day, nobody knows why he played it. I mean, that a player of this caliber played this move is somewhat unbelievable, but he played the move here, bishop takes h2, grabbing this pawn. Now, I'll say, again, I think even people in the audience are going to see the move white can play quite quickly, but especially if you're newer at this, I want to give you a chance. So pause your videos if you want to try to figure out what white played here. I'll take another sip of my water. Okay, keep your video paused if you want more time. But this is something that, players, scholastic players learn quite early on, is it's very dangerous to go pawn grabbing with a bishop. It can be what's called like a poison pawn, and here it really is a bad pawn to grab, because now the problem is bishops, they go backwards on diagonals, and white can now slam the door on you with pawn to g3. Now this bishop has no way to escape, and you're not in time to rescue it with something like, h5 to h4. And we'll see why, because it's just too slow. So in the game, Fischer tried that, h5, king to e2, h4, and now after just simply king f3, the bishop, we see that the bishop remains trapped. There's no actually saving it. Fischer played king to e7. He could have played h takes g3 here, but after f takes g3, the bishop is still trapped. The king is coming to g2, and there's no rescuing it. If bishop to g1, it doesn't matter. King to g2, and white's bishop is defending the e3 pawn. Again, this bishop is just lost. In the game, Fischer played, after king f3, king e7, Spassky continued king g2, takes, and Fischer had to give the bishop for a second pawn. And, okay, well, black has a couple of pawns for this, but at the grandmaster level here, the extra piece really does matter. Spassky went on to win this game. I can play through the rest of the moves kind of quickly. I won't go into deep explanation because, again, that's not really the point of this series. It's just focusing on these blunders by world champions, but it just went Spassky creating some activity for his bishop, maybe on this diagonal. We see king to d5, bishop to a3. King comes in trying to steal this pawn. Spassky wants to keep pawns on the board, as you should do. When you're ahead of material, you want to trade pieces, but not pawns. Pawns could be extra queens, so you want to keep those. Fischer's trying to trade pawns, but Spassky won't let him. Now Spassky starts... so basically this pawn on b6 is a potential passed pawn one day. We just have to work the king over to c7 to try to take it. So Spassky starts moving his king. Here we don't have a choice but to trade pawns. Continuing to try to work the king, bishop e3, just keeping an eye on this pawn on b6 and trying to also take away some of these squares and trying to out-tempo black's king here so our king can advance. I know I'm going through this a little bit quickly, but again, the point was mainly that initial blunder. King e4, bishop to f2 just to hold on, bishop to h4, kind of forcing black to make some move here. He pushes the pawn. We see bishop g5 once again. Black doesn't want to move his king because that lets the white king get in further, but at the same time, every pawn push is just allowing this bishop now to rest on e3. We see king to f6, so Spassky comes around with his king this way, continuing to make progress towards the b7 pawn. And then, onward through. Fischer does eliminate this pawn. If he could magically get rid of this pawn, or if he could manage to work his king back into the corner, he might be able to draw, but Spassky's too quick for him. And after king d6, black resigns. There's just no dealing with king to c7, and king takes b7. If he tries to run this pawn, he's just painfully too slow. Something like this. I mean... if white even was really concerned about this pawn, he could even play something like bishop d4, and now he's just guarding. This pawn will never promote, and white will just take and promote his pawn. So, yeah, it was I guess you could call that a nice win from Spassky, but truthfully, this game was just a dead draw until Fischer decided to go grabbing this h2 pawn for reasons that even today nobody really understands. It's kind of a mystery in chess history. So anyway, all right. So and we'll continue on with the next world champion after that, which would be Spassky in tomorrow's video. So all right, I'll see you guys next time. Take care.